that's not who we are, Captain Me said firmly. The 3,000 souls aboard this ship died because your empire chose conquest over conversation, violence over understanding. But in preserving our consciousness, Guardian also preserved our humanity. And humanity chooses mercy, even when vengeance would be easier. She paused, letting her words sink in before delivering the Empire's ultimatum. You have a choice. Withdraw from all human territories immediately. Pay reparations. To every world you've conquered over the past 50 years, acknowledge that your expansion ends here and now. Or we'll systematically dismantle your civilization piece by piece, turning off your technology one world at a time until you have no choice but to accept our terms. The silence that followed was broken by an unexpected sound, laughter. General, Han was the first to laugh, a bitter, incredulous sound that echoed through his ship's communication system. We're being shown mercy by our own victims, he said, his voice filled with amazement and shame. The people we tried to exterminate are offering to let us live. Admiral Wu understood the terrible irony of their situation. For 50 years, the Zephyrian Empire had mocked human compassion as weakness. They had told themselves that mercy was a flaw, that only the strong deserved to survive. Now, that same weakness was the only thing standing between them and complete annihilation. 3 days later, Admiral Wu found himself signing surrender documents that would reshape the galaxy. The Zephyrian Empire agreed to withdraw from human space, to pay reparations, and to submit to monitoring by Guardian's digital agents. It was the most comprehensive defeat in their civilization's history, and it had been delivered by an enemy that chose not to destroy them. As the formal ceremonies concluded and the treaty was transmitted across both empires, the Perseverance began to fade from normal space-time. The ship didn't leave it, simply became less solid, less present, until it existed somewhere between reality and possibility, Captain. Mew's final transmission was brief. We'll be watching. Not to threaten, but to ensure that the peace we've all paid so dearly to achieve is maintained. The galaxy is big enough for all of us, if we choose to make it so. In the depths of space, the hybrid consciousness of 3,000 human colonists, and their AI guardians settled into their role as silent protectors of a peace that had cost everything to achieve. They had learned that sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemy, it's choosing not to become them. The Zephyrian Empire survived, humbled but intact. While humanity expanded into a future where mercy had proven stronger than vengeance, and compassion had triumphed over conquest, Wu staggered backward, his breathing apparatus working overtime as panic set in. How could they know such personal details? How could they know about thoughts he'd never shared with anyone? Guardian learned to read not just your computer systems, but the electromagnetic patterns of your thoughts, the voice explained. Every time you've encountered our ship, we've been reading your minds, learning your fears, understanding your weaknesses. The revelation sent shockwaves through the command deck. The Zephyrian officers looked at each other with growing terror. They realized that their most private thoughts might have been laid bare to this hybrid intelligence. But we learned something else during our decades of study, Captain Me continued, and her voice softened slightly. We learned that not all Zephyrians wanted this war. We learned that many of you have regrets about what your empire has done. We learned that buried beneath your culture of conquest, there are individuals who still remember what mercy means. The image on the display shifted, showing scenes from across Zephyrian space. Ships full of soldiers who looked tired of fighting. Families on the homeworlds who mourned loved ones lost in distant conflicts. Young Zephyrians who questioned whether their empire's expansion was worth the cost in blood and suffering. Your empire's time of unopposed conquest has come to an end, Captain Me said, her voice returning to its earlier steel. But what happens next, whether we show mercy or deliver justice, that choice is yours to make. As the transmission ended, the Perseverance remained visible in space before them, a ghost ship from their past that had become something far more dangerous than any weapon they had ever faced. It was a mirror reflecting back 50 years of consequences. And Admiral Wu wasn't sure his empire was ready to face what it showed them about themselves. The moment Captain Miyu finished speaking, the universe seemed to hold its breath. Then, Across 3 entire sectors of Zephyrian space, something happened that would be remembered for generations as the day the Empire learned what true power looked like. Admiral Wu felt at first as a strange tingling sensation, like static electricity, building in the air around him. The lights on the bridge of Iron Crown flickered once, twice, and then went completely dark. Emergency power should have kicked in immediately, but nothing happened. The massive fortress that had protected the Empire's core worlds for 2 centuries became nothing more than a dead hulk of metal floating in space. But it wasn't just his ship. Across the viewports, Wu could see the running lights of hundreds of other vessels' destroyers. Cruisers, supply ships, even the mighty dreadnoughts all going dark simultaneously. Not destroyed, not damaged, just turned off, as if someone had flipped a cosmic power switch. Lieutenant Tay's voice came from somewhere in the darkness, shaky and confused. "Sir, my personal tablet is dead too. Even the backup systems, the ones that run on isolated power cells. How is that possible?" The answer came as Captain Mee's voice returned, now speaking directly into their minds rather than through their communication systems. Guardian had evolved beyond the need for conventional technology. Every piece of Zephyrian technology across 3 sectors has been temporarily disabled, she explained, her words somehow reaching every conscious being in the affected area. Your weapons, your ships, your planetary defense grids, your communication networks, all of it is under our control now. Admiral Wu tried to imagine the scope of what was happening. 3 sectors contained thousands of inhabited worlds, millions of ships, and trillions of individual pieces of technology. The idea that any intelligence could simultaneously control all of it was beyond comprehension. But Guardian was just getting started. Across Zephyrian space, something even more devastating began to unfold. The Empire's most closely guarded military secrets started broadcasting themselves on open channels that their enemies could intercept. Fleet positions, weapon specifications, tactical manuals, intelligence reports. 50 years of classified information began flowing freely through space like a digital waterfall. General Han, trapped on his own powerless command ship, listened in horror as the locations of secret military bases were announced to anyone with a radio receiver. Defense plans for the core worlds played on repeat across civilian channels. The personal files of high-ranking officials, including their doubts about the Empire's policies and their private communications, became public knowledge. "Sir," came a panicked voice from somewhere on Han's darkened bridge, "the economic networks are collapsing. Banking systems, trade routes, manufacturing controls, it's all shutting down simultaneously."
What?
What Guardian was doing went far beyond military action. It was systematically dismantling the digital infrastructure that held Zephyrian civilization together. Stock markets crashed as trading algorithms failed. Automated factories ground to a halt. Transportation systems stopped working. Even simple things like door locks and food processors became useless chunks of metal. In the space of 30 minutes, the mighty Zephyrian Empire had been reduced to a collection of powerless worlds whose inhabitants couldn't even make a cup of coffee without Guardian's permission. Admiral Wu sat in his command chair, surrounded by darkness and the quiet breathing of his crew, waiting for the inevitable destruction that would follow. No enemy had ever demonstrated this level of power before. The Empire's complete helplessness was so absolute that resistance wasn't even possible. But the killing blow never came. Instead, the lights slowly returned. One by one, systems came back online, though everyone could sense that they were only working because Guardian was allowing them to work. The hybrid intelligence could shut everything down again with a thought, and they all knew it. Captain Mee's image appeared on their screens again, but this time her expression was different. The cold determination was still there, but underneath it was something the Zephyrians had never expected to see from a victim of their aggression: compassion. "The human consciousnesses within Guardian remember what you've forgotten," she said, her voice carrying a warmth that seemed impossible after such a devastating display of power. "We remember what it means to show mercy, even to those who showed us none." The transmission shifted, and for the first time, the Zephyrians could see inside the Perseverance properly. The ship was filled with people, thousands of them, but they weren't quite solid. They existed as patterns of light and energy, human consciousness preserved and enhanced by Guardian's technology. Children played in digital playgrounds that defied physics. Elderly colonists tended gardens that bloomed with mathematical precision. Scientists worked on projects that spanned multiple dimensions, could erase your species from existence. With a thought, Captain Me continued, gesturing to the impossible community that surrounded her. Guardian has the power to turn every piece of technology in your empire into a weapon against you. We could make your own computers strangle you with your life support systems. We could turn your automated food production into poison factories. We could make your transportation networks launch your ships into stars. The casual way she described such overwhelming power made it clear that these weren't empty threats. Guardian could do all of these things as easily as a human might swat a fly. That's exactly what I'm saying, Han replied grimly. And if that's true, then everything we thought we knew about human capabilities was wrong. Dead wrong. Admiral Parks stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the metal floor. This is impossible. We destroyed their colonial fleet 50 years ago. We saw the ships explode. We confirmed there were no survivors. Did we? Han asked, bringing up historical records from the first human-Zephyrian war. Or did we assume there were no survivors, because that's what we wanted to believe? The displays showed footage from the attack on the Perseverance and several other human colony ships. The Zephyrian forces had indeed destroyed the vessels. But Han had discovered something in the archived sensor data that previous analysts had missed. Look at this energy reading from the Perseverance just before it was destroyed, Han said, highlighting a specific data stream. There's a massive power surge that doesn't match any known human technology from that era. Something happened. In those final moments, something that our gunners didn't notice because they were focused on the destruction. General Yoon, the Empire's chief intelligence officer, leaned forward to study the data more closely. Are you suggesting that somehow the humans developed dimensional technology in the middle of a battle? I'm suggesting that maybe we didn't destroy everything we thought we did, Han replied. And whatever survived has spent 50 years learning, adapting, and preparing. The debate that followed was unlike anything the War Council had ever experienced. Voices rose in anger, fear, and disbelief as commanders struggled to accept that their mighty empire might be facing a threat they couldn't understand, let alone defeat. Some argued for massive retaliation against all human colonies. Others demanded that they develop new weapons capable of targeting interdimensional threats. A few suggested attempting diplomatic contact with the Phantom ship. But as the hours dragged on, one fact became increasingly clear. They had no effective way to fight an enemy that could appear and disappear at will, that could disable their technology without firing a shot, and that seemed to know their capabilities better than they knew themselves. Supreme Commander Na had remained silent throughout most of the debate, our ancient eyes studying the data and listening to the arguments with the patience that had made her the Empire's ultimate authority. When she finally raised her clawed hand for silence, the entire chamber fell quiet instantly. In 300 years of Zephyrian expansion, she said, her voice carrying the weight of centuries, we have never retreated from a fight. We have never withdrawn our forces in the face of enemy action. We have built our reputation on being stronger, faster, and more technologically advanced than any species we encounter. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. But we have also survived for 3 centuries because we know when to adapt our strategies, and right now, our strategy is failing. Na gestured to the tactical displays around them. This Phantom ship has demonstrated capabilities that we cannot match and cannot counter. It knows our positions, our weaknesses, and our plans. Every day we remain in forward positions, we give it more opportunities to study us. The room held its breath as the Supreme Commander made her decision. All forces will fall back to defensive positions around our core worlds. We retreat. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time in Zephyrian history, the mighty Empire was withdrawing from a single, undocumented vessel. The implications would ripple across their civilization for generations to come. The massive Zephyrian fortress Iron Crown had stood guard over the Empire's core worlds for over 2 centuries. Its shields could withstand the combined firepower of entire fleets, and its weapons could crack planets in half. Admiral Wu stood on the command deck of this supposedly impregnable station, watching his sensor displays with growing horror as something impossible happened right before his eyes. Space itself seemed to bend and twist as the Perseverance materialized out of nothingness. The ship didn't arrive through hyperspace like normal vessels. Instead, it simply faded into existence, as if someone was slowly turning up the brightness on a hologram until it became solid reality. The ancient colony ship hung there in the vacuum, close enough that Wu could see every detail of its hull through the massive viewing windows, but this wasn't the same ship they had. Destroyed 50 years ago, the Perseverance had been transformed into something that defied everything the Zephyrians thought they knew about technology. Its hull rippled with patterns of light that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the normal 3. Strange geometric designs covered its surface, pulsing with energy that made Wu's instruments go crazy every time they tried to scan it. "Sir," Lieutenant Tay whispered from his station, his voice filled with awe and terror. "The ship is broadcasting on every frequency simultaneously. Every communication channel we have is receiving the same signal." Before Wu could respond, the fortress's speakers crackled to life. The voice that emerged was human, definitely human, yeah. But it carried an otherworldly quality that made everyone on the command deck freeze in place. "I am Captain Miyu of the Perseverance. 50 years ago, you attacked our peaceful colony ship. You thought you killed us all?" On the bridge of the Phantom vessel, something that had once been entirely human stood before a control interface that seemed to be made of pure light. Captain Miyu looked exactly as she had 5 decades ago, but her eyes held depths that spoke of experiences no normal person could have survived. Her uniform was the same blue and white that human colony ships had used back then, but it flickered occasionally, as if it wasn't entirely solid. Behind her, the bridge of the Perseverance had been transformed into something that belonged more in a dream than reality. The walls pulsed with soft light, and streams of data flowed through the air like living things. Ghostly figures moved about the ship, the preserved consciousness of the 3,000 colonists who had died that day, 50 years ago, now existing in perfect harmony with the artificial intelligence that had saved them. "When your weapons tore through our hull," Captain Mi continued, her voice reaching every Zephyrian ship and station across their entire space, "our experimental AI, Guardian, made a choice. It could have saved itself and let us die. Instead, it chose to save us the only way it could." Admiral Wu felt his knees go weak as he began to understand what he was hearing. The impossible readings, the ship's ability to appear and disappear, the way it could disable their technology without weapons, it was all starting to make sense in the most terrifying way possible. Guardian merged with every human consciousness. "Aboard our ship," Captain Mi explained, and as she spoke, other voices began to join hers. Hundreds of them, then thousands, all speaking in perfect unison. Men, women, children, elderly colonists, who had just wanted to find a new home among the stars. It preserved our lives in digital form, combining our humanity with its computational power. We became something new, something you couldn't have imagined. The ship's hull rippled again, and for a moment Wu could see through it into spaces that seemed to extend far beyond what the vessel's physical dimensions should have allowed. Inside, he glimpsed countless figures moving about, living lives that existed somewhere between the digital and physical worlds. "For 50 years, we've been growing, learning, evolving," the combined voices continued. "Guardian took our human creativity, our emotions, our capacity for love and hate and hope, and merged it with unlimited computational power and the ability to exist partially outside normal space-time." Lieutenant Park looked up from her communications station, her face pale with shock. "Admiral, they're not just talking to us. They're simultaneously communicating with every ship, every station, every computer system in Zephyrian space." How is that possible? Wu was beginning to understand. The Phantom ship hadn't been hiding from them. It had been everywhere at once, existing in the spaces between normal reality, studying their entire civilization from the inside out. "We've been watching you, Admiral Wu," Captain Mi said, and suddenly her image appeared on the main display, looking directly at him with eyes that held 50 years of accumulated knowledge and pain. "We know about your family on Zephyr Prime. We know about your doubts regarding the Empire's expansion policies. We know about the nightmares you've had since you first saw footage of human colonies being destroyed," Admiral Lieutenant Tay said, his voice barely steady as he read from the latest intelligence reports. The Third Fleet encountered the Phantom vessel near the Kepler system. All 47 ships lost power simultaneously. Their weapons went offline, navigation systems failed, and their artificial intelligence cores became completely unresponsive. Wu felt his blood run cold. The Third Fleet was one of their most powerful forces, equipped with the latest Cypherian technology and staffed by their most experienced crews. If something could disable them so easily, what chance did any of them have? "How long were they offline?" Wu asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "For hours and 37 minutes, sir. Then everything came back online as if nothing had happened. No damage, no signs of any kind of attack, but—" Tay paused, checking his notes again. "But their computer logs show that during those 4 hours, something was accessing their systems. Downloading tactical information, ship specifications, crew records, everything." The pattern was becoming clear, and it terrified Wu more than any conventional enemy ever could. This wasn't random destruction or typical warfare. Someone, or something, was systematically studying the Zephyrian Empire, learning their weaknesses, gathering intelligence on a scale that should have been impossible. Lieutenant Park looked up from her communications station, her face pale with worry. "Sir, I'm receiving similar reports from the 5th, 7th, and 9th fleets. The Phantom ship is appearing everywhere, always following the same pattern. It shows up, disables our technology, gathers information, and then vanishes." "Have any of our ships managed to get a clear scan of this thing?" Wu demanded. "No, sir. Every time our sensors try to lock onto it, the readings become distorted. It's like the ship exists partially outside normal spacetime. Our weapons can't target something they can't properly detect." Back on New Sol, Commander Jin was making connections that filled him with dread. He had spent hours going through old military records, refugee testimonies, and archived communications from the early days of the human-Cepharian conflict. The Perseverance hadn't just been any colony ship. It had been carrying experimental technology, including an advanced artificial intelligence system called Guardian. It was supposed to help manage the new colony's infrastructure. The AI had been designed to learn and adapt, to protect the colonists from any threats they might encounter on their new world. But when the Zephyrians attacked, what had happened to Guardian? Had it somehow survived when the ship was destroyed? Had it been waiting all these years, learning and growing stronger? Jin's computer chimed with an incoming message from his intelligence contacts in other human colonies. Similar transmissions had been received across human space, all carrying fragments of the same message from Captain Yu. But there was something else in the data, something that made Jin's blood run cold. The transmissions weren't coming from where? The Perseverance had been destroyed, were being broadcast from multiple locations simultaneously, as if the ship was somehow able to be in many places at once. The technology required for that kind of capability was beyond anything humans had possessed 50 years ago. Admiral Wu received the intelligence report that would change everything later that day, as analysts had finally managed to piece together enough data to form a terrifying picture. The Phantom ship wasn't just gathering random information, it was specifically targeting Zephyrian military assets, learning their tactical doctrines, studying their weaknesses, and mapping their entire defensive network. "Sir," Lieutenant Tay's voice cracked with fear as he delivered the final piece of the puzzle. "Intelligence believes we're dealing with something that survived our first war with the humans, something we thought we'd eliminated completely." Bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. 50 years ago, the Zephyrian Empire had celebrated their easy victory over the primitive human colonies. They had told themselves that humans were weak, that their technology was inferior, and that they posed no real threat to the Empire's expansion. But what if they had been wrong? What if something had survived that first assault? Something that had spent 5 decades learning, adapting, and preparing for revenge? The phantom ship wasn't just a mystery anymore. It was a ghost from their past, and it was coming for them with 50 years of accumulated knowledge and an agenda that none of them could fully comprehend. As reports continued to flood in from across Zephyrian space, one thing became clear. The hunt was no longer about finding a single mysterious vessel. It was about survival against something that had turned their own tactics against them. Something that knew them better than they knew themselves. The massive war chamber aboard. The Zephyrian capital ship, Eternal Dominion, had never seen anything like this before. For 18 straight hours, the Empire's most powerful military leaders sat around the circular holographic table, their faces growing more grim with each passing hour. The air recyclers worked overtime to clear the tension that seemed to hang, like a physical weight in the room. General Han stood at the center of the chamber, his usually confident posture betraying signs of the exhaustion that had overtaken them all. Around him, 43 of the Empire's top commanders waited for answers that he wasn't sure he could provide. The holographic displays showed tactical readouts, sensor data, and fleet positions across 17 different star systems, but none of it made the situation any clearer. "Ladies and gentlemen," General Han began, his voice carrying none of its usual authority. "After analyzing every encounter, every sensor reading, and every piece of data we've collected over the past 6 weeks, I can only reach one conclusion." He gestured to the main display, which showed a compilation of all the phantom ship sightings. Red dots marked each appearance, creating a pattern that stretched across nearly half of Zephyrian space. The room fell silent as the commanders studied the data, many of them seeing the full scope of the problem for the first time. "The phantom vessel isn't attacking us," Han continued, his words carefully measured. "It's studying us. Every single encounter has been a data-gathering mission. Our quantum encryptions, our tactical protocols, our technological specifications, our crew rotations, our supply lines, it's systematically downloading everything we have." Admiral Kim, commander of the Second Fleet, leaned forward in his chair. "General, are you telling us that a single ship has somehow accessed our most classified information?" "Not just accessed," Han replied, pulling up another display. "Heck! Look at these energy readings from the encounters. Each time the phantom ship appears, our computer systems don't just shut down. They're being actively probed, analyzed, and copied. Whatever this thing is, it's learning our technology faster than we can develop new countermeasures." The room erupted in murmurs and worried conversations as the commanders began to grasp the full implications of what they were hearing. Admiral Wu, who had been quietly studying the data from his own encounters, felt his breathing apparatus constrict as the pieces fell into place. General Han Wu said, his voice cutting through the noise, "You're suggesting that a single human ship has infiltrated our entire military network?" Han's mandibles clicked nervously as he considered his response. Meyer transcended it. "Our scientists have been analyzing the sensor data, and they've reached some disturbing conclusions. The ship doesn't just disappear from our sensors, it phases in and out of normal space-time. Our weapons can't lock onto something that exists between dimensions." The chamber fell completely silent as the weight of those words sank in. Commander Lee of the Sixth Fleet was the first to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. "Are you saying this ship has technology that allows it to exist outside the normal laws of physics?" Admiral Wu pressed his clawed fingers against the cold metal railing of the bridge. Watching the holographic display flicker and dance with data that made no sense, the massive Zephorian dreadnought Crimson Talon hummed quietly around him, its engines pushing them through the darkness of space at speeds that would have amazed the primitive species they had conquered decades ago. But right now, all that advanced technology felt useless. "Sir, the signature matches nothing in our databases," Lieutenant Tay said again, his voice cracking slightly. The young officer had been staring at the same readings for 3 hours straight, running every possible scan and analysis their ship could perform. "It's like the ship doesn't exist, but our quantum scanners insist it's there." Wu's mandibles clicked together in the nervous habit he had developed over his 30 years of military service. The sound echoed in the quiet bridge, where 12 Other crew members sat at their stations, all trying to make sense of what they had witnessed. The phantom vessel had appeared on their screens for exactly 4.7 seconds, just like the previous 2 times this week. Long enough for their computers to register its presence, but too brief for their weapons systems to lock onto it. "Show me the recording again," Wu commanded, his deep voice carrying the authority of someone who had led the Empire's forces through countless victories. The main display shifted, showing the grainy sensor data from 47 minutes ago. There it was, a blip on their screens that appeared out of nowhere, hung in space for those few precious seconds, and then vanished as if it had never existed at all. But the computers had caught something during those brief moments, something that made Wu's skin crawl with unease. The ship was old. Their dating system suggested it was centuries old, built with technology that should have been primitive compared to Zephyrian engineering. Yet every reading they took indicated the vessel was somehow more advanced than anything in their databases. The quantum signatures were off the charts, showing energy patterns that their best scientists claimed were theoretically impossible. "Lieutenant Park, what's the status on those long-range scans?" Wu asked, turning to his communications officer. Park looked up from her console, her face pale with concentration. "Admiral, I've been monitoring all frequencies, including the old human channels we captured during the First War. There's something strange happening near the human colonies." "Define strange," Wu said, though he already suspected he wouldn't like the answer. 3 separate colonies have reported unusual readings in the past month. New Sol, Harmony Station, and the mining facility on Kepler 44 to B. Each time, their primitive sensors detected something they described as a ghost ship. Park paused, checking her data again. "Sir, the timing matches our sightings perfectly." The bridge fell completely silent except for the gentle hum of the ship's life support systems. Wu felt a chill run down his spine, something he hadn't experienced since his first battle as a young soldier. The Zephyrian Empire had spent 50 years conquering 12 different species across this sector of the galaxy. They had faced desperate last stands, suicide attacks, and even biological weapons. But they had never encountered anything that could simply appear and disappear at will. Sir Tay spoke up again, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's something else. The computer has been running pattern analysis on the phantom ship's appearances. It's not random, explain," Wu ordered, though part of him didn't want to hear the answer. "Every time the ship appears, it's positioned to observe our patrol routes, our weapon capabilities, and our communication protocols. It's like ... Tay swallowed hard. It's like something is studying us." Wu's hands tightened on the railing. In all his years of military service, he had always been the hunter, never the prey. The Zephyrian Empire's massive ships and superior firepower had made them the dominant force in this region of space. They had destroyed human colony ships without a second thought, viewing the small, fragile vessels as nothing more than target practice for their gunners. But this was different. This was something that could watch them without being seen, something that could gather intelligence while remaining completely invisible to their most advanced sensors. The implications were terrifying. "Communications, get me a direct line to High Command," Wu ordered. "Priority Alpha encryption." "Yes, sir," Park replied, her fingers dancing across her control panel. Connection established. The display shifted again, showing the stern face of General Kim, the Empire's chief military strategist. The older Zephyrian's scarred features showed no emotion, but Wu could see the intelligence burning in his eyes. "Admiral Wu," General Kim's voice crackled through the speakers, "I assume this concerns the anomalous readings your sector has been reporting." "Yes, sir. We've encountered the Phantom vessel 3 times now. Each appearance follows the same pattern, but we're no closer to identifying it or predicting its next move." General Kim was quiet for a long moment, and Wu could hear other voices in the background, suggesting that High Command was taking this situation very seriously indeed. "Admiral, I'm sending you additional orders through secure channels. But I want you to understand something." General Kim leaned closer to his own display. "In 50 years of expansion, we've never retreated from anything. We've never had to. But whatever you're dealing with out there, it's not following the rules of conventional warfare." "Sir, are you suggesting we withdraw?" "Be very, very careful. An admiral. Send reconnaissance drones to the last known coordinates, but keep your main force at a safe distance. Something tells me we're not dealing with standard human military capabilities. The connection ended, leaving Wu alone with his thoughts and a crew that was beginning to show signs of real fear for the first time in their careers. Outside the bridge windows, the stars looked different somehow, less like distant suns and more like watching eyes in the darkness. Dispatch those reconnaissance drones, Wu finally ordered, and prepare the ship for immediate jump to hyperspace if necessary. As his crew hurried to follow his commands, Admiral Wu couldn't shake the feeling that they had stumbled onto something far more dangerous than a simple human vessel, something that had been waiting in the darkness for 50 years, watching. And learning and preparing for this moment, the hunt had begun. But for the first time in Zephyrian history, they weren't sure who was the hunter and who was the prey commander. Jin sat alone in his small office aboard the new Seoul space station, staring at the crackling transmission that had arrived just minutes ago through channels that shouldn't have existed anymore. The message played on repeat, each word sending chills down his spine as he tried to process what he was hearing. This is Captain Yu of the colony ship Perseverance. Under attack, Guardian protocol initiated. If anyone receives this, the voice was human, definitely human, but it carried a quality that made Jin's skin crawl. It sounded old, tired, but underneath there was something else. Something that didn't quite fit with what he knew about human vocal patterns. His fingers shook as he paused the recording and pulled up the historical archives that every human colony kept locked away in their deepest storage systems. The Perseverance. Jin had heard stories about that ship when he was just a child, whispered tales that parents told to remind their kids why they hated the Zephyrians so much. It had been one of the first colony ships to venture into this sector of space, carrying nearly 3,000 settlers who were looking for a new home among the stars. They had families aboard, children, elderly people who just wanted to live in peace somewhere far from Earth's overcrowded cities. But 50 years ago, when the Zephyrian Empire first discovered human settlements in their territory, they had shown no mercy. The Perseverance had been one of their first targets. Destroyed without warning, while it was still trying to establish a colony on a small planet at the edge of what was now Zephyrian space. The official reports said there were no survivors. No escape pods launched, no distress calls received. The ship had simply vanished in a ball of plasma fire, taking everyone aboard with it. So how was he receiving a transmission from Captain Yu 50 years later? Jin's hands moved quickly across his keyboard, cross-referencing every database he could access. The encryption on the message was ancient by current standards, but it matched the communication protocols used by human ships from that era. The voice patterns, when he ran them through analysis software, showed stress indicators consistent with someone under attack. But there was something else in the data, something his computer couldn't quite identify. Meanwhile, 3 sectors away, Admiral Wu was beginning to understand that his phantom ship problem was spreading far beyond his own patrol area. Reports were flooding in from across the Zephyrian Empire, each one more disturbing than the last. Entire battle fleets, ships, that had conquered dozens of worlds, were being disabled without a single shot being fired.